She buried her husband. 2 years later, her 6-year-old daughter reached up and took another man's hand, and Mara realized she hadn't told her not to. That was the moment she understood she was already in trouble. This is a story about the specific terror of wanting something, again after you've already learned what losing feels like. Mara Calloway was 34, living in Portland, Oregon, surviving on routine black coffee and the quiet discipline of a woman who had decided that stability was more important than hope. 2 years earlier, her husband Daniel had died of a cardiac event on an ordinary Wednesday morning, shoes still by the door, coffee still in the pot, and the life she'd built with him had simply stopped. The way a clock stops when you forget to wind it. What didn't stop was Ren, 6 years old, dark-eyed, serious, relentlessly curious. The kind of child who asked questions adults avoided and remembered everything you wished she'd forget. Mara had taken a part-time office manager position at a mid-size architecture firm in downtown Portland, not because she loved the work, but because it had hours that matched Ren's school schedule and a paycheck that covered the gap. Practical, safe, contained. The man she met there was named Callum Bryce. He was a contractor, brought in seasonally to oversee third-floor renovations. He wore scuffed boots. He carried a battered thermos. He had the kind of quietness that didn't feel like shyness, and it felt like a choice. He did not try to impress her. He did not try to charm her. He looked at her the way a careful person looks at something they've decided not to touch. She noticed all of it. That was the first problem. The second problem was Ren, because Ren noticed him too, and Ren had never learned the particular survival skill of keeping her feelings to herself. What neither of them knew yet, the man in the scuffed boots had more rooms in his life than he was showing anyone, and Mara was about to mistake his restraint for smallness. One of the most expensive errors she would ever make. The first weeks were professionally unremarkable. Mara ran the office. Callum's crew worked the floor above. Their exchanges were brief and functional, a form requiring a signature, a noise concern relayed upstairs, a maintenance request forwarded to right person. He always said thank you. He always meant it. She cataloged this without intending to. It was Ren who broke careful distance, the way children break things completely and without apology. On a Thursday in October, Mara brought Ren to the office on an early release day. She was on a call for 20 minutes. When she looked up, Ren was gone. She found her on the third floor, standing in the middle of a partially demolished office, staring up at Callum Bryce with the focused attention she usually reserved for documentary narrators and people she'd decided were interesting. Callum had crouched down to her level. No one had asked him to, and was answering a question Mara hadn't heard. But why do you take the walls apart? Ren was asking. Because sometimes, Callum said, the wall was built wrong the first time. Doesn't mean the building is ruined. Just means you have to get back to the structure and start from what's actually solid. Ren thought about this with great seriousness. My mom had to do that too. After my dad died, she looked at him. She cried a lot, but she didn't stop. The silence that followed was exactly 1 second long. Mara, standing in the doorway with her heart somewhere near her throat, watched Callum absorb her daughter's casual devastation without flinching. He nodded slowly. That sounds like someone worth knowing, he said. Then he looked up and saw Mara. He didn't look embarrassed. He didn't look like a man who'd been caught saying the right thing. He just looked at her the way he looked at everything, steadily, without performance. She stepped in, apologized, collected her daughter. He said goodbye to Ren first, then to her. Standard, professional. She went home that night, put Ren to bed, and stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes doing nothing, which was not something she did. November arrived gray and persistent. Mara and Callum began sharing the break room by coincidence, then by something that was no longer coincidence but that neither of them named. They talked about practical things, the renovation schedule, Portland parking, Ren's refusal to wear weather-appropriate clothing. He mentioned he'd grown up in Bend, that he'd moved to Portland 6 years ago after a business partnership ended. He didn't elaborate. She didn't ask. He asked her once, carefully, the way he did everything, how long she'd been managing on her own. 2 years, she said. He nodded, didn't follow it with, I'm sorry, or that must be so, hard, or any of the things people said when they wanted to. Acknowledge pain without getting near it. He just said, "You're doing well." And the way he said it, observational, not consoling, made it land differently than a compliment. It landed like a fact. She cried in the shower that night. She was starting to notice a pattern. Wren, operating on her own separate agenda, had decided Callum was hers. She drew him a picture, a house with a perfectly level baseline, two stick figures wearing hard hats, and Mara delivered it with a full apology. Callum took the drawing, studied it, said nothing except, "The proportions are good." The next morning, Mara came in early to drop something at the third floor. The drawing was pinned above his work desk. He wasn't in the room. There was no one to thank or acknowledge. She just stood there looking at her daughter's crayon house on a contractor's wall and felt something move inside her chest that she did not have a safe place to put. The conflict arrived the way quiet things do, through a door she hadn't meant to open. She was returning a clipboard to the third floor when she heard Garrett, Callum's apprentice, talking in the stairwell below. I looked it up. Bryce Architecture, Seattle. He founded it. Built the whole company over like 12 years. Won half the regional design awards in the Northwest. Then sold it and just walked. My cousin works in commercial real estate. Says the sale was somewhere around 40 million. A pause. The other worker said something low. "I don't know why he does this," Garrett said. "But it's not because he needs the money." Mara stood in the hallway and did not move. $40 million. She replayed it backward. The scuffed boots, the battered thermos, the way he'd fixed the supply closet door, hinge on a Tuesday afternoon without anyone asking, and left a handwritten note like a man who had no greater claim on his time. She thought about Wren's drawing pinned to his wall and felt something cold move through her. Not because of the money, but because of the distance between what she'd assumed and what was real. She knew distantly that the feeling was irrational, that a man keeping his past private was not the same as a man being dishonest. She knew this the way you know. Something, when grief has already taught you that knowing a thing and feeling it are two entirely separate events. What she felt was, I trusted the image and the image was incomplete. And that feeling had a particular shape, Daniel-shaped, loss-shaped, that she was not equipped to examine calmly. When Callum came to the break room that afternoon, Mara was already packed up to leave. She said hello. She said she had a thing with Wren's school. She did not look at him long enough to owe him anything. He said, "Sure, have a good evening." She was almost at the door when he said quietly, "Mara." She turned. He was looking at her with the careful steadiness she'd come to recognize. "I don't know what you heard, but I'm not hiding anything important." The sentence was so precise, not hiding anything important, that it stopped her completely, because it meant he knew what she'd heard. And he was choosing not to explain himself, not to perform, not to chase. She should have found that reassuring. Instead, standing in the doorway of the break room in the gray November light, something cracked open in her. 2 years of controlled grief and managed distance, and she said, before she could stop herself, "Then why does it feel like everyone I trust turns out to have a whole side I didn't see?" The words landed in the room like something dropped from a height. His expression didn't change exactly, but something behind it did, like a door that had been slightly open, closing quietly. "I understand," he said. She left. She made it to the parking garage before her hands shook. That night, Wren asked if they were going back to the building with the construction man. Mara said she didn't know. Wren looked at her across the dinner table, this small, perceptive, relentless person, and said, with devastating simplicity, "Did you push him away?" Mara set down her fork. "What?" "You do that." Wren's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. "When you're scared, you do that. You did it with Aunt Renee, too. After Dad, you get quiet and then the person stops coming around." She picked up her fork again. "I liked him." Mara did not have an answer that was appropriate for a 6-year-old. She didn't have one for herself either. She put Wren to bed and sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, which was something she hadn't done since the week after Daniel died, and she stayed there for a while. 12 days passed. Mara minimized her presence on the third floor. She told herself this was professional discretion. She was good at telling herself things. What she was less good at was the specific shape of his absence. The thermos on the break room rack, there in the morning, gone by 8. The sound of the crew above her, voices she'd learned to identify without trying. The particular quality of a Tuesday afternoon when she had a reason to go upstairs and chose not to. She pulled out her laptop one evening after. Wren was asleep and searched. Bryce Architecture, Seattle. The first result was a business journal profile, 4 years old. There was a photograph, a man in a sharp suit at an industry awards dinner, looking at the camera with an expression she recognized as his. Present, but not quite there. It took her a moment to fully reconcile him with the man she'd watched crouch down to her daughter's level in a demolished office and talk about walls. The article described 12 years of building something from nothing. Award-winning design, a company that had changed shape multiple times as he'd refined what he was trying to make. And near the end, a single line, brief and unremarked upon, the way significant things often are in journalism. Bryce cited personal loss as a factor in his decision to step back from the industry. She did not search further. She closed the laptop and looked at Wren's second drawing, finished now, sitting on the kitchen counter, not yet delivered. She'd been carrying it in her bag for a week. She thought about a man who had built something worth $40 million, then walked away from it with a thermos and a pair of scuffed boots, and chosen to make things with his hands in other people's buildings. She had called that restraint smallness. She had mistaken his quiet for limitation. She understood now, sitting in her kitchen at 11 at night, that she had done this because small things were easier to lose. She went back to the 3rd floor on a Wednesday morning. She had a folder. The folder was not urgent. She was aware of this. He was alone, running measurements on a window frame when she walked in. He looked up. He waited, that same unhurried patience went without filling the silence. "I looked you up," she said. "I figured you might. You sold your company." "Yes. And then you just..." She gestured at the room. The tools. The thermos on the floor. "This." "Yes." He set down the measuring tape. "My wife died 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 14 months from diagnosis. We'd spent 10 years building the company together. She was the business side. I was the design side. When she was gone, everything I'd built felt like a monument to a version of my life that didn't exist anymore." He looked at her steadily. "I didn't want a monument. I wanted something real. Something I could see finished at the end of the day." The room was quiet except for the building's ventilation system and the distant sound of the city. "I'm not performing humility," he said. "I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. The boots are real. The work is real. The money exists, but it doesn't change what I actually am, which is someone who needs to build things to feel like himself." Mara stood very still. "I said something unfair to you," she said finally. "In the break room. About not seeing people's sides. That wasn't about you." She stopped. "It was about me. About being terrified of trusting my own perception again. I know. I don't think you should let me off the hook that easily." Something shifted in his expression. The closest thing to a smile she'd seen from him in 2 weeks. I understand the fear." He looked at her. "I've been standing in it for 4 years myself." "Then why..." She stopped. Started again. "Why did you pin her drawing on the wall?" The question was small. It was not small. He took a moment before answering, and when he did, his voice was quieter. "Because she gave it to me without wondering whether she should. I didn't know I still needed that." Mara breathed in, breathed out. "I have the second one in my bag," she said. Wren delivered it herself. She had insisted on this. She presented it to Callum on a Thursday afternoon with the focused gravity of someone who understood, on some animal level, that this was a moment requiring ceremony. It was better than the first. She'd practiced the roof, she explained, and she'd added a tree because she'd read that trees make houses look more real. There were 3 figures in front of it. She had labeled them carefully in her uneven handwriting. Mom, Callum, me. He crouched down, looked at it for a long moment. His jaw moved once, slightly, the only visible evidence of whatever was happening behind his face. "You put a tree in," he said. "For the roots," Wren said seriously. "So it doesn't fall." He looked up at Mara then. She looked back. They went to dinner the following weekend. Low-key place in southeast Portland, where Wren informed the waiter that the pasta was under-seasoned and asked Callum 17 questions. About what held bridges up? He answered each one. By the end of the meal, Wren had used her paper napkin to sketch a bridge, and Callum was pointing out which elements were structurally accurate, which delighted her so thoroughly that she knocked over her water glass. Walking to the car after, Wren moved between them on the sidewalk and reached up, one hand for Mara, one hand for Callum, and with the simple, devastating trust of a child who has already decided and sees no reason to explain herself. Callum took her hand. He looked down at Wren, then across at Mara. "I'm still scared," Mara said quietly. Not an apology. Just a fact. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you not to be." They walked through the cold Portland night, Wren between them, asking what the biggest bridge in the world was, the city lights blurring in the wet streets around them. Mara did not have every answer. She did not have a plan. She had her daughter's hand in one of hers, and the knowledge that the man on the other side of Wren had also learned, the hard way, the only way that you build from what's actually solid. Some nights that's the only foundation that matters, and some nights it's enough to stand on. Watch the next story on your screen.